There was a version of you who had to fight for everything, who lived in survival mode, who smiled through storms and made it look easy on the outside, who buried the pain just to keep going. That version of you was sacred, but that version of you was not the final form. You don't owe the world your exhaustion anymore. You don't have to prove your strength by suffering, because the old you was survival. This new you is peace. Let's be clear. Survival isn't shameful. You adapted. You adjusted. You did what you had to do with what you had at that time. You were hyper-vigilant because no one made you feel safe. You became independent because depending on others always let you down. You became strong because vulnerability just wasn't an option. But just because it worked doesn't mean it has to keep working. Survival was just a season, not a life sentence. And now that the war is over, you don't need to keep fighting. Here's the real truth. If you lived in chaos long enough, peace will start to feel suspicious. If you've been hurt enough times, love will begin to feel unsafe. And sometimes the hardest thing to do is to believe that you are actually allowed to stop fighting. Because trauma doesn't just leave pain, it leaves patterns. You start believing that struggle equals worth, that rest is laziness, that joy is a trap. But that's the old you talking, the one who had to survive everything. You're not there anymore, and that version of you deserves a break. This version of you doesn't chase validation, doesn't tolerate chaos, doesn't abandon self just to keep others comfortable. This you sets boundaries. This you breathes deeper. This you speaks softer. Not because you're weak, but because you're finally safe. You're not the storm anymore. You're the calm after it. You're not the defense mechanism. You're the healed nervous system. You're not the one bracing for impact all the time. You're the one building a life rooted in ease. This you is peace. Now comes the hard part. Can you let that go? That version of you that carried it all? Not out of disrespect, but out of reverence. Thank that version of you. Honor that version of you. But don't keep becoming that version of you. You don't have to anticipate worst case scenarios anymore. You don't have to downplay your needs. You don't have to earn rest through exhaustion. It's safe now to be soft, to be still, to be whole. The weapons you once needed, you can now lay them down. Peace doesn't always come naturally. Sometimes it has to be relearned, practiced, protected. You may have to unlearn the hustle, unlearn the proving, unlearn the fear of joy. But trust that it is worth it, because this version of you, this version doesn't live in survival anymore. This version creates sacred space. They walk in softness. This version of you chooses themselves unapologetically. And if no one told you today, you don't have to fight anymore. You don't have to run anymore. You don't have to explain why you need rest anymore. The old you was survival, but this new you is finally peace. God bless.